Incognito, huh? What's that? It's not going to happen. Have you ever seen the show? The show about that? Looking to make a name for himself. I went to Newfound. I built a school. Huh? It was all behind the scenes. All behind, and the superintendent was behind it too. She was behind it too. And I wouldn't have any problem with her making it. I mean, I tell her that she was on back meeting. Tell her like the meeting to the other day, well, that's a section she's done. And but she's going to pull it. Definitely going to pull it. I've been to a lot of these things. Usually you can't get away from it. Usually they have to come from both directions. If you got your hat on, you can keep your head down and still see your hand going.
Jeff?
Check. Check 1, 2. Good. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Good job. Good job.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Jeff? That figures. He's a member, and then he gets noticed when it's going on. Now he's over resistant. He was right behind him. Right, now you're resistant. Oh, no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Okay, my father.
Good to meet you. My name is Jeff Duggan. You asked me to stand up. This post yes, it's the third Wednesday of the month, 7 o'clock. Mine's the third Thursday of the month. And the VFW is the second Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, huh?
Well, we got a full house.
Excuse me. There's got to be a John around here.
Yes, sir.
Always making connections. That's why when he runs for president, everybody knows. Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think David. Oh, that's. Oh, okay. I thought that was David. That's not David Starr.
He had one there.
He's good.
That gentleman doesn't look like he's breathing too well. I see the sheet right there. Right beside him. That's
That we out of chair.
Let me see if I can get someone.
I can get it this way, Jack. Jack. Up, Jeff. Jeff. They got one.
Another chair. We can put a chair over by the door. Okay?
Well, we'll put it on.
Right there or something like that. The guy with the airline. see you again, baby.
That's what I do up here.
All right. Maybe some high school guy doing that. On your feet, please.
Gonna do the
Salute. I pledge allegiance
allegiance.
play ball.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have Governor Christie come to conduct a town hall here, and I'll simply turn it over to him.
All right.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. All right, welcome and thank you. I want to first, before we begin, just acknowledge, because I'll be heading out to Milwaukee for debates when Veterans Day comes, to say Happy Veterans Day to all of you. Acknowledge the service of all the veterans who are here this morning at the town hall. And on behalf of the people of New Jersey, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you all.
No, never that. I got trouble.
Been an interesting few days up here in New Hampshire, as it often is. I just want to talk to you about one thing off the top, and then I want to get the rest of the time to your questions.
Just kidding.
In presidential campaigns, I'm finding out that you never quite know what comes out of your mouth that will make an impression with people. Because in presidential campaigns, you do a lot of talking if you're the candidate. If you're me, you answer a lot of questions. And as you can see behind you, there's always lots of cameras on you all the time, and that's not counting, the iPhones that are always recording what you have to say. So you never quite know. About a month ago, I was here in New Hampshire doing a town hall meeting. And it was this is my 33rd town hall meeting as a presidential candidate in New Hampshire. This is my 46th day in New Hampshire as a presidential candidate, and that's a lot more than any of the other candidates on the Republican side. And so I've spoken a lot up here. And this one particular day, folks from the Huffington Post website decided to do a profile on me. They wanted to follow me for an entire day of campaigning in New Hampshire. So they did. It ended in the evening in a bar. Oh, now, come on. It's where I had the town hall meeting. Listen, don't laugh. My town hall meetings in bars are really good. When people start drinking, and I get much more charming. It's really, it's fabulous. So we were in this bar, and we had a packed bar, and they were taking video of me as they were all day. This is a month ago now, beginning of October. For some reason, last Friday, they decided to take a piece of that town hall meeting, about 5.5 minutes, and post it on their website. And it was me talking about the issue of addiction. As of this morning, yes, on Facebook, yes, ma'am. And as of this morning, in a week, that's gotten, just on Facebook alone, 7.1 million views. 7.1 million views. I think what it tells you is, and what it's teaching me, is that when you speak about issues that you care about from the heart, and that other people care about, that folks can tell. And I will tell you that for me, it's an extraordinarily important and personal issue, and one as president I would spend a lot of time talking about. We know, up here in New Hampshire, as we know all across the country, that there's a heroin epidemic going on in our country. There's an epidemic of addiction to prescription drugs that often lead then to heroin. And we know that it's killing our friends and our neighbors and our children in record numbers. I was in Hanover last night, doing a town hall meeting in a bar. And as I was walking up to the bar, I had an extraordinary experience. I was walking up to it, shaking hands with folks, and there was a young couple standing there with their dog. And I went up and introduced myself and said hello. And the husband said to me, Governor, I just wanted to thank you for the words that you said on the Huffington Post. It's particularly meaningful to us. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And he said to me, because our son died a week ago today of a drug overdose, a heroin overdose. He said, we're here in Hanover because our daughter goes to Dartmouth. And it's been a particularly tough week, given that her 23-year-old brother died a week ago. So we wanted to, they're from Rhode Island. So we wanted to come here and make sure that she's doing okay. And then we heard you were going to be here. And we wanted to come over here just to say thank you to you because we don't want our son's life to be forgotten. I just looked at him and I said, I don't know, as a father, quite frankly, how you're putting one foot in front of the other, let alone make your way over here to thank me for something that I said. And he looked at me again and he said to me, it's because I want our son's life to have mattered. And unfortunately, there are thousands of those stories that I'll never hear that he represents. And what he told me was that his son had been taken to the emergency room 5 times, and they never knew. And because he was 23 and parents didn't have to be informed. 5 different times he'd been taken to the emergency room having overdosed, and 5 different times they saved him. And the 6th time they couldn't. We need to be doing something different in this country about this problem. And the first part of being able to do that is to lift the stigma from seeking help. And that's why in that video that you see, I talk first about my mom. Because my mom was addicted to cigarettes. And I know she was addicted to cigarettes. She started when she was 16 years old in 1948. And she smoked her whole life. Even after 1964, when the Surgeon General report came out and they told you that it could lead to lung cancer. Even after all the years that it became more and more definitive that smoking led to all types of cancer, my mom tried everything. She tried the gum, she tried the patches, she even tried hypnosis. We particularly like that when she tried hypnosis, I have to tell you. It just mellowed her out a little bit, which was nice. She kept smoking, but she was a little calmer, which was good for the house. But she could never stop. And I tell the story that when she was finally at 71 years old in May of 2004, diagnosed with lung cancer, there was no one who said to me, hey, listen, your mom's been smoking for 55 years. She knew the dangers. She chose it herself. We're not going to treat her. She's getting what she deserves. And no one ever said that to me. No one would have ever thought to say that to me or to her. They said, let's do chemotherapy, let's do radiation, let's do surgery, let's try to help you, let's try to save your life. No one made a value judgment, a moral judgment on my mother's addiction. They understood that she tried as hard as she could and nothing worked, and so they wanted to try to help her. Yet, it seems to me when we have someone who's addicted to heroin or cocaine or prescription drugs or any of these other addictive drugs we have, we make a moral judgment on that. We say, yeah, well, you made the choice, and there's a stigma that attaches to it. You never have a family member be reluctant to tell you that a family member of theirs has cancer. I don't want to talk about it. There's nothing shameful about it. Yet, parents are reluctant all the time to open up and say, my child has a drug problem or an alcohol problem. Because somehow we think that reflects on us. That somehow we failed as a parent. Somehow we failed as a husband or a wife or a brother or a sister, that we failed. Here's what we need to get over, I think. I'm not advocating drug use. And quite frankly, if you've watched some of the debates, you've seen that I'm the one who is most strident about not legalizing marijuana, and gotten in a bunch of back and forths with Senator Paul, who thinks it's okay to legalize marijuana. I do not. So I want you to understand my position on this. I'm not for legalizing drugs because it sends exactly the wrong message to people. And marijuana is a gateway drug, and it does lead to other things. And it does lead to an inability to be able to focus and be productive and all the rest of that. So I am opposed to it solidly, completely. And as president, I would make sure that I said to the people of California and Oregon and Washington, get high now, guys, because when I'm president of the United States, it's going to be over. All right, we're going to enforce the law. But I doubt there's anybody in this room who has not made a bad choice in their lives. I know I have. I've made bad decisions, bad judgments in my life. And I think any of us in this room, if we're honest with ourselves, we've made some bad decisions, bad judgments in our life. The good thing for most of us in this room, I hope, is that they didn't involve drugs. So if all of us have made some bad judgments and bad decisions that we'd like to have a chance to go back and reverse, why is the judgment that someone made one night to try drugs a decision that we can't allow ourselves to allow them to reverse? And I think we got to start thinking about it a little bit differently, because you know what I tell our children all the time is you can't try this stuff once, because you never know. You never know whether you've got the type of personality, the type of genetic makeup that one try will lead you to be an addict. You don't know. And that's playing Russian roulette. And you don't want to play Russian roulette with your life. But if they do try, what do we do? I mean, I'd say that the last 30 years, 35 years of the war on drugs has been a failure. It was well-intentioned. It was well-intentioned. Nancy Reagan saying, just say no, well-intentioned. Us incarcerating people over and over and over again, well-intentioned. We thought, scare them straight. Send them to jail. They'll understand when they come out. They never want to do this again because they don't want to go back to jail. It makes some sense. But we didn't understand then what we understand now, that this is a disease. It's an addiction. It's a disease. And it needs to be treated. It needs to be treated like a disease. And that doesn't mean if you commit violent acts, you don't go to jail. You should. We have to send you to jail. If you're dealing drugs, you're dealing this poison and making money off it in our neighborhoods, you go to jail. But if you're a user who's committing some petty nonviolent crimes to support your habit, what we're doing in New Jersey now is first-time offenders who are not violent, not dealing, they're not going to prison. They're going to mandatory inpatient treatment for a year. And it's done two things in our state and continues to. The first is that you go to jail, you're not getting treatment, you're incarcerated, they smuggle drugs into jail, people remain addicts, and then they leave and they recommit crimes, and we wonder why they do. We haven't treated the underlying problem. Second thing it's doing is it's lowering our prison population. In the last 3 years, our prison population in New Jersey has gone down 10%. Think about that happening in any other state in America. We're to the point in New Jersey now where I may be able in the next year to close a state prison. Close a state prison. Up here, you're talking about building another one. We're closing because it's what we're doing is being effective. And here's the last good part. Of the population in our jail, we're up to nearly 60% now violent criminals. That's a 10% increase. Why? Because we're opening up cells for the violent criminals. And that's who belongs in jail. The sociopaths who are going to murder and maim on our streets. We need to open up more jail cells for them. Make sure they're in there nice and comfy and kept there for a long time. We need to approach this drug problem differently. The last reason I think we need to approach it differently is because I'm pro-life. Now, it's easy, in my opinion, to be pro-life when they're in the womb. Right? That first 9 months, we got to be pro-life beyond that first 9 months. If we're pro-life, you got to be pro-life for the whole life. And you know, it's a lot easier then because they haven't done anything to disappoint us yet. All right? They come out, life gets a lot more complicated. I'm pro-life for the 16-year-old teenage girl who's lying on the floor of the county lockup addicted to heroin. Her life is just as precious and just as much a gift from God as the life in the womb. And that's why in that video I talk about my friend, which I won't go into detail about this morning, but a guy who in his mid-40s had everything. Beautiful wife, 3 beautiful daughters, partner in a major law firm, making a lot of money, big beautiful house, great car, good-looking guy, ran 10 to 12 miles a week, he was in excellent shape, had everything going for him. Hurt his back, started taking prescription drugs to help his back pain. And 10 years later, after a number of interventions from me and friends of his like me, we got a call on a Sunday morning that we inevitably thought we were going to get. That this great friend of mine from law school, who we vacationed with every summer, who we were as close to as we were to anybody, was found in a bad motel room in New Jersey by himself after he had been divorced, lost his law license, lost his driver's license, lost his ability to see his children, and went through every dime he had. He was found in that hotel room with an empty bottle of Percocet and an empty quart of vodka. And he was dead at 52 years old. And by every measure that we look at conventional success in life, he had it. Ivy League educated, great job, great family, great home, great life. It happens to anyone. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I'm suggesting to you that's the way we have to start thinking about this. That every time I talk about it, I'm going to say that phrase, there, but for the grace of God, go I. And if we believe that in our hearts, then we're going to start treating this problem differently. And I think the way to do that, the most effective way to begin that dialogue and that change of heart and mind and soul in this country is for the President of the United States to stand behind the seal of the President and say it over and over again, all across this country. To let people know that if the President of the United States believes we have to do this differently, maybe everyone else at least will start to think about it. And that's the way movements get started in this country. You know, I had a guy say to me last week in Iowa, do you really think that can make a difference? And I said, man, that's the only thing that's ever made a difference, is that one person in an important position stands up and says it over and over again. And you eventually get to people's hearts and their minds. And that's what I'm going to do as president on this issue. So you need to know that before I get there. You need to know that this is an important thing to me. And I'm tired of watching lives wasted, as I believe every life is an individual gift from God. And you know, I use that phrase all the time. I want to tell you, and then I'll take your questions, where I got that phrase from, because she deserves credit for it. It's my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is 86 years old. She is the mother of 10 children. Mary Pat is one of 10 children. She has 6 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and a younger sister. This woman is amazing. And one time, I got into a discussion with my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. One of those Christmas discussions that you get into, like later at night when almost all the other guests have gone home and everyone's had just enough wine to be a little more open than you might be otherwise. I said to my father-in-law, or to my mother-in-law first, I said, Mom, I said, 10 children. I said, if you had to do all over again, would you have 10? And she looked at me and she said, yes, Christopher, because every one of my children is an individual gift from God. And I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing and powerful. And it stayed with me. And I use that phrase all the time. My father-in-law, on the other hand, who was a Wharton Business School graduate, I turned to him, and I think he had more wine than the rest of us. And I said, hey, so Dad, I said, do you agree with that? Would you have 10 children again if you had to do it over again? And he looked at me and said, nope, I'd have 5. And I said, which 5? And he looked at me and said, I have a list, I'm not telling you. And my father-in-law passed away about in the summer of 2003, ironically from lung cancer also. And he, Mary Pat was the executrix of his will, so I know she was one of the 5. And my father was this Wharton Business School graduate, so he was very organized, meticulously organized. And so we started going through his file cabinet. And I said to Mary Pat, I said, you know, your father was so damn organized. I bet you there's 2 file folders. One that says 5 I would have kept, and the other one says 5 that I wouldn't have. I guarantee you, we're going to find it in here somewhere. But his part of the story is funny, but my mother-in-law's answer was the one that has stuck with me. And it stuck with me for all those years since then, that each life is an individual gift from God. And if we believe that in our hearts, and I do, and I think most Americans do too, then we have to treat this issue differently. And God doesn't make judgments in that way. And I think he expects us, his servants here on earth, to be able to make those judgments in the same way he does, which is that each life is precious, and we need to help these folks. And I know it's a crisis up here in New Hampshire. But what you need to know is you're not alone. It's a crisis all over this country. And it's time for a president to stand up and talk about it and not give a wink and a nod to legalizing drugs in certain states, which is what this current president is doing. He's giving a wink and a nod and saying it's okay. He's talking about how he did it too. And, you know, it's okay. Look at me. I'm president. That's not the message we need to be sending out there, in my opinion, and it's not the message that I will send as president of the United States to our children. So here's the good news. I'm done talking. And you all get a chance to ask me questions about whatever you want. Our town halls are different than most. In many, I understand. I don't go to my other opponents' town halls, but I understand. Well, I might someday. That might actually be fun. I have a question. Right? It might be good, right? It might not be bad. You know, I understand that some of them you have to write down your questions and hand them in to their staff, and then they get to, you know, filter which ones you know the candidate might like or not like. This is pretty easy. In my town halls, you raise your hand, I call, and you ask me whatever you want, and I answer it. The only thing I don't respond to is yelled out questions. And that's not because I'm governor of New Jersey. It's not because I'm a candidate for president. It's because I'm a father of 4. And I have an acutely honed sense of ignoring things that are yelled at me. And I can't, and it's one of those things I can't turn on and off. You know, I'm just good at it, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm happy to take your questions on anything. I'm thrilled that you're here on a Saturday morning and taking your time to listen. I appreciate it. So let's go. I'm going to take my jacket off because it's time to work, and you all ask me whatever questions you like. Raise your hand.
Yeah. Oh. Making more nervous.
You get your own microphone. How about that?
How you permit the glorification of drug? Never mind those states that want to legalize marijuana. Everything in the music, the access that our young kids have to this information. Yep. How are you going to fight that without putting and breaking the Constitution?
Yes. We don't want to break the Constitution.
No, we don't.
But here's what I tell you. Teddy Roosevelt called the presidency the bully pulpit. And it is an extraordinarily powerful tool if you know how to use it. If you know how to communicate to people, the presidency is the biggest microphone in the world. When the President of the United States speaks, people listen. Children listen. Adults listen. People in foreign countries listen. We are still, and will continue to be, the most important and consequential nation in the world. And the leader of that nation has a great deal of influence on all of those things. I would tell you that I think that the permissiveness that you discuss has been contributed to by the President of the United States. And that's what I was implying in the last statement I made before we took questions. It's like, you cannot, as president, kind of do this wink and nod, hey, I'm cool. You know, I smoked pot when I was young and maybe did some other stuff too. He doesn't really talk about that, but he kind of, you know, winks at it a little bit. And then he lets, you know, Oregon and Colorado, Washington legalize marijuana, even though it's against federal law. He doesn't do anything to stop it, even though he could as president. He doesn't. Those messages are subtle but powerful. Because if the President of the United States is telling our kids it's okay, and their parents are telling them it's not, they got an out. Yeah. President says it's okay. President's letting them smoke pot in Colorado. What are you bothering me for? They're looking for an out. We remember, many of us in this room, when we were that age. We were looking for an out too, to do something we wanted to do that our parents didn't want us to do. We're looking for an excuse. I'm taking away that excuse as president. And in fact, I'm going to push back in the other way. So when I say Colorado, Washington, Oregon, get high now, because it's ending, we will end it. We will end that permissiveness in those states. And we'll enforce the law. Justice will be more than just a word. It will be a way of life. The law's on the books. It will be applied to everyone. It will be applied to them equally, fairly, without prejudice or bias, but it will be applied. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I spent 7 years of my life as the United States Attorney in New Jersey prosecuting crime. I know how to do this, and I will appoint an Attorney General who will not take any nonsense. But I will also talk about it to folks in the way that I spoke to you about it this morning, in a way that's compassionate and that understands that this is not an easy thing and just a choice. It gets much more complicated than that. And so just say no is not enough. I'll say that, but you got to say more, that when you do have the problem, you need to reach out to somebody. You need to get help. And I think when you talk about it in that way, it not only gives permission to those who have fallen victim to the disease to get help, but I think it also tells the other people who haven't tried yet, maybe I don't want to go there. Maybe I don't want to go through that. I don't want to go through going to jail. I don't want to go through dropping out of school. I don't want to go through the trips to the emergency room where they're putting the paddles on my chest to try to keep me alive and giving me Narcan to try to reverse the effects of the heroin. Maybe I don't want to go through that. And man, the president's talking to us about that, and maybe I should listen. There's no silver bullet to fix this. There's no law that can be passed. But what we need to do is to be talking about it. The act of a president talking about it gives permission, if not an imperative, to families to talk about it, to neighbors and friends to talk about it. That's the way you change things in this country, neighborhood to neighborhood. And that's what leadership is supposed to be about. No one ever said this was going to be easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. It's hard, but it's worth it. And I think that's the only way we can do it. There's no other magic way to get it done. And that means it's going to take some time. And it means we're going to lose some lives in the process. We're going to. And it'll be horrible for each one of those families when that life is lost, like that family I met last night. But he is right. We need to honor the loss of his son by doing something about it. And that's the way I try to do it. It's not perfect, but I think it's the best way to do it. Yes, sir.
In the town of Plymouth.
I don't think he needs one.
In the town of Plymouth, we were told we were going to have a medical marijuana dispensary. There was a town hall meeting up here where the state people came up, and they said, finally the question was, well, this sounds like it's a done deal whether we want it or not. All the people in the town were saying, we don't want it here because of the university, because stuff. The state of New Hampshire said, it's a done deal whether you like it or not. And I didn't know that that was a communist government in our state house, and I didn't know that it was a communist government in Washington, D.C. that tells the people how it's going to be. Our son is the chief of police of a town. He's got almost 30 years service in. They can't even take somebody, right now, if you get drunk and you need to be taken in, they can arrest you for internal possession and hold you to protect you from yourself. You can't do that with drugs. There's no law that allows them to take somebody in the state of New Hampshire into protective custody to protect themselves. And then some lawyers spoke up and said, oh, the answer to that is legalize everything. You know, I'm going like, geez, whoa. They don't get it.
No, they don't. And listen, on medical marijuana, you know, we have that in New Jersey. It got signed into law at 3 o'clock in the morning I was going to be sworn in as governor by my predecessor. One of his final gifts to me on the way out. He was a little aggravated that I had beaten him and decided to give me a number of gifts on the way out the door that he signed in the middle of the night. In New Jersey, what we've said, though, is on medical marijuana dispensaries, if the community doesn't want it, they don't have to have it. And for the dispensaries, we've said, you got to go find a welcoming community that wants it. So the idea that, you know, the state would impose a dispensary on a community, to me, is contrary to everything that we're supposed to stand for. That community is supposed to be able to make the judgments as to what businesses come into their community and what businesses are not permitted in their community by their zoning and their ordinances and all the rest. So that makes no sense to me. I will tell you, too, that the medical marijuana stuff is a very narrow thing when done correctly. Now, in New Jersey, I've imposed this in a way to make it very, very narrow. You have to have 2 different doctors, all of whom are registered with our program, who get monitored. You have to have 2 different doctors prescribe it. There are only a certain narrow number of diseases that you can actually get this for. It has to go through a registration process. You have to go through a registration process and a monitoring process. We've had very few people sign up for the medical marijuana program in New Jersey because there are very few people who fit that criteria. The rest of them were looking for like what they had in Colorado at first before they legalized the whole thing, which was, you know, I got a headache, can I have some pot? You know, might make your headache feel better, but I don't know that it's necessary. Advil works too. You know, this type of activity in our country, you know, is leading to what this woman said in her question, you know, a certain permissiveness that sends the wrong signal. And, you know, signals matter. Now, on the medical marijuana front, there are some people who it does help. And for those folks, I have no problem with it making available to them. If it's the only thing that can alleviate their suffering, that's fine. But lots of people use that as a foot in the door to broaden it. And that's where leaders have to be vigilant about not letting that happen. We've been very vigilant in New Jersey about it. We don't impose things on the communities, and we don't allow people who are not truly sick with the number of diseases that really marijuana has been medically proven to alleviate pain or seizure activity. Those are the only ones that we allow it to do it for. And I think even though I wouldn't have signed that bill into law if it were put on my desk, the other thing about this too is, unlike the President of the United States, I don't pick and choose the laws I enforce. I took an oath to say I would enforce the laws of the state of New Jersey, even the ones I don't like. And if you don't do that, then you contribute to lawlessness throughout the country. Because if we can all start picking and choosing which laws we enforce as leaders, then I assume you get to pick and choose which laws you get to comply with as the governed. I don't think that's the kind of society we're looking to have. Yes, sir, right there.
In July, you indicated that you would be defunding Planned Parenthood if you were elected president.
Yes, sir.
If you do that, the question was, in July, you indicated you would defund Planned Parenthood if elected. If you do that, how will you replace the general health care provided by Planned Parenthood apart from the abortion services?
Federally qualified health clinics, which operate all throughout this country, are funded both federally and with state money. We have over 110 federally qualified health clinics just in the state of New Jersey. And the thing I like about the federally qualified health clinics is that they treat everyone, men and women, for the full range of their medical challenges, whatever they are. And the attitude I have about this is you should be treating the whole person. And at federally qualified health clinics, you can. You don't have to hop from doctor to doctor. You go to the same clinic, you see the same physicians, and it helps to make sure that your health care you're getting is consistent, efficient, and effective, not only for the patient, but for the taxpayer. So we have the ability to do this. And there's this myth that's been exploded now by these hearings, you know, that Planned Parenthood provides mammograms. Let me make it clear to all of you, the president of Planned Parenthood testified at Congress that not one Planned Parenthood clinic provides one mammogram. What they do is if a woman comes and needs a mammogram, they're referred by Planned Parenthood to a place that actually does mammograms. Well, federally qualified health clinics, some of them have those machines in there already, but they could do the same kind of referral. This is a political argument. And I want to make sure that no matter where you are on the economic spectrum, that you can get health care for yourself and for your family. Federally qualified health clinics can do that. And I defunded Planned Parenthood in New Jersey 6 years ago, in my first year as governor, and they've gotten no funding from the state of New Jersey since then. And I vetoed 8 different bills to attempt to override that defunding of Planned Parenthood. And here's why. I cannot support an organization with taxpayer money that has engaged in the systematic murder of children in the womb in a manner in which it allows them to maximize the value of certain body parts for sale on the open market after the child is murdered. I'm sorry, I just can't. And I don't think taxpayers should be forced to do that. If folks want to do that with their own private funds, that's their choice. You want to write a check to Planned Parenthood and support their mission? I have no objection to that. That's your right as an American to support the organizations you want. But I don't believe it's right for us to impose upon other Americans through their tax money the idea that they would support something that they find to be morally reprehensible. And so we have other avenues to be able to do this. We've done it. We've done it in New Jersey. And I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't do it on the federal level and make sure that folks between federally qualified health clinics and Medicaid, people have access either through individual physicians that are Medicaid eligible or through these clinics to be able to get the full range of healthcare services that they need. And the idea that, you know, Planned Parenthood is the only place to go for that is a myth. Thank you, sir. Ma'am in the back right there.
Thank you. Welcome to New Hampshire again,
Thank
Governor
you.
Christie. And I'm happy to hear everything you've said. I agree with. I can't believe it, but it's true.
Tremendous. Okay, everybody, goodbye. We'll see you later.
But I do have an area that hasn't been mentioned that I have a real passion for, and that's the senior health care and the senior care, you know, as they get older. I've been in healthcare my whole life, and then I was an agent for healthcare insurance because I wanted to help seniors. They have so many things they have to decide that they have no clue about, and they shouldn't have a clue about it, okay? And you think out of the box, and I hope when you're president that you wind up looking at the process, because we have great health care, but terrible processes. When I started working in healthcare, it was taking care of the patient. Now it's taking care of pharmaceutical companies and administrators and everybody that's not a healthcare professional. That's where most of the money goes. So the processes have to be looked at so that we can wind up having the family also take part. I think the education regarding preventing, putting research money in that area, all of that is good because our seniors right now with their families, if they in fact say aren't well enough to be at home and have to go to a nursing home, there are so many catastrophes. Why isn't something there for families to be able to utilize to take care of their mother and father, their grandmother, their grandfather, some help there? So if you could touch base on what you think about that area, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Let me tell you what we've done in New Jersey that I think has worked and may have some applicability to the whole country. We've moved away in New Jersey from the nursing home model and moved much more towards home care and put more resources into it. We've cut back on the reimbursements to nursing homes in order to take that money and fund it for folks who want to take care of, as you said, their mother or father, their grandmother or grandfather in their own home, to provide home health care folks to be able to help them to help along with whatever their treatment is needed, everything from folks who have Alzheimer's to folks who have other debilitating diseases that are chronic. And so there's not going to be an immediate death, but there is going to be a slow and long, I'm going to try to speak on Saturday morning, a slow and long deterioration. And so we've seen some really good success in that, not only in the results we're getting, but more importantly in the response from families, who are, many of them, scared to death of sending their loved one off to a nursing home and that what might happen to them when they're there. Now, that's not an indictment of the nursing home industry because there's many nursing homes, in fact, most in my experience in New Jersey, who care deeply about their patients and work really hard to make sure they get good treatment. But there's a detachment then from the family that lots of families are now saying, hey, I want to keep my mother or father, my grandmother or grandfather close to me. I want them to be in familiar surroundings. I want them to feel loved as their life ends. And I don't want them to be in a more sterile kind of institutional type of setting. We're doing that not only with the elderly, we're doing that with the developmentally disabled. And moving folks out of institutions and much more into group homes and private home situations. And I think it could not only be more humane, but it also could be more cost effective over the long term. And so I think that's one of the things that we've done in New Jersey that we've seen some success with. And that's something we need to consider when we're looking at Medicare and Medicaid and how they deal with these individual issues. And if you go on my website, you'll see I have an entire plan on entitlement reform that deals with seniors and soon-to-be seniors on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security disability insurance. And I urge you to look at it. It's the only plan any candidate's put out there. No other candidate in this race has dealt with entitlements, yet 71% of our spending in the federal government right now are on entitlements and debt service. 71%. We need to get a handle on that, because if we don't, not only will we bankrupt our country, but we will abandon those seniors because there won't be money there to help to take care of them, which they need, and many folks are depending upon to be able to keep their lives going in retirement. So that's the way I would deal with that particular situation. And then if you look at my website at chrischristie.com, there's a lot more there on entitlements in general that I think you should look at. And after you look at it, come back to another town hall meeting and ask me about it, or challenge me on the stuff that you don't like, because I'd love to talk to you about it. Yes, sir.
I'd call it an entirely different subject that really none of the candidates I've heard talk about. The first issue I have problem with is, of course, our huge debt. But if the question is, what would you do about our space program and the continuation of the space program?
It's interesting. I have never been asked this until the last 24 hours. And I've had two people on the opposite ends of the age spectrum ask me this. Last night at Dartmouth, I had a Dartmouth college student ask me about the space program. And now I've had you ask me about the space program. Well, regardless of what your age is, you're clearly not a freshman at Dartmouth. That much I know. Here's my point, and it ties right into my answer to that lady's question. If we don't get entitlement spending under control, I got no money for the space program. I got no money for national defense. I've got no money for science and technology. I've got no money for education. I've got no money. We have a $19 trillion debt. We can't even imagine what that number is. It's unfathomable to us. It's just a number. 19 trillion. We don't get entitlement spending under control, everybody. That's all we're going to be spending money on. It's 71% of what we're spending already. So I would love to invest in the space program, because it leads to other cutting edge technologies that we not only use to go back to the moon or to Mars, but that we use in our everyday lives here on Earth. So I'd love to do that, and I'd love to be able to invigorate a new generation of scientists and engineers to say we're going to be the ones who are going to come up with the idea to get this country to Mars and back safely, and then have those engineers and scientists be the ones who then also invent the next number of inventions that lead America to continue to be the country that's on the cutting edge of innovation and technology in the world. But I'm telling you, if we don't get this other problem under control, we do not have the money. We don't have the money to do any of it. The plan that I put forward that I asked you to go and take a read on is it'll save $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years, and do so in a way where it's really not harming anybody who's in the system now, and just acknowledges that all of us are living longer lives, and we have to change the programs to acknowledge that blessing, that the average life expectancy of a woman now in America is 83, and the average life expectancy of a man is 79. I saw someone smile there. One of the ladies smile. Just remember that 10 years ago, you were 6 years ahead of us. 10 years later, you're only 4. We are gaining on you. And that 4-year vacation from us you're thinking you're going to get at the end, you may be stuck with us the whole time. The whole time. But this is a blessing, right, that we're living this much longer. But remember, these programs were implemented at a time when average life expectancy for men and women were in the mid-60s. So we're living 15 to 20 years longer, and all those 15 to 20 years are for most people in retirement. And so it is an enormous stress on the system, and we need to do something to change that. So I would love to invest in the space program, because not only is it an aspirational thing that makes America feel good about itself in a kind of psychic way, but it also is an enormous contributor to science and technology that is apart from direct application to space, that helps us to keep on the cutting edge of those things. But I'm going to be honest with you. If we don't get agreement on this other stuff, I don't have the money to do it. Yes, sir.
Hi there. I'm actually vice president of the College Republicans from the state.
All right.
Right up the hill. I just wanted to say thank you for coming up here. A lot of candidates tend to ignore the North Country a little bit, and we get a lot of people at Dartmouth and UNH, but
I picked a good weekend to come to North Country, though, right? I mean, seriously, I walked out, I'm like, this is really nice. I said to my security staff, I go, last warm weather trip to New Hampshire. I guarantee you, this is going to be it. So enjoy it while you can.
So I just wanted to say thank you on the
You're
behalf
welcome.
of our group for coming here. We have a couple more of us in the corner.
Great.
There. I wanted to ask, as president, what would you do to make American energy cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable?
All right. We are on the edge of being able to have an energy revolution in this country because of the new ways that we're exploring for energy and the technological ways we're developing renewable energy. So let's start with exploration. The way to make us independent and make it more reliable is to explore for more oil and natural gas. We have now, scientists are saying, a 100-year supply of natural gas underneath the ground here in the United States. Extraordinary. And we have the ability to go and get it in environmentally safe ways. And because of the advances in drilling, we have access to even more oil than we've ever had before. We need to exploit those resources. We need to exploit them not only for reliability here in the United States, but it can be an important geopolitical tool for us, and I'll get back to that part in a second. Let me tell you what we've done in New Jersey. In New Jersey, without being in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which unfortunately for all of you, you're a part of, here in the Northeast, which means it just adds a tax to you, because they say they're going to clean the air by making another tax on you. It's a fascinating thing. And we're going to change the world just here in the Northeast of the United States. I pulled out of it when I became governor of New Jersey because I didn't want to add another tax to my citizens and make their utility bills even more expensive. But without being in that Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, we've already met our clean air goals for 2020 by 2014. How'd we do it? 53% of New Jersey's electricity is generated by nuclear power. Now think about that, because New Jersey is the most densely populated state in America. 8.9 million people in that little space. That's why we get a little cranky every once in a while, that's all. A lot of people there. But we've operated for 4 decades nuclear reactors in our state safely. 3 Mile Island was a long time ago, everybody. And we need to revisit nuclear, in my opinion. It does not add to the pollution in our air, and it is a safe and reliable source of energy, and we've been using it for 40 plus years in New Jersey. We have the oldest operating nuclear reactor in the country at Oyster Creek in New Jersey, and it's going to be closing in the next 2 years because it's reached the end of its useful life, but without a problem ever. 53% of nuclear. Tonight, if you happen to go out to a bar somewhere, which I know college students don't do, but if you happen to, just wander in to pick up something to eat or something, you can win a bet. Ask somebody at the bar, who are the top 3 states producing solar energy in the country? First 2 are easy, California and Arizona. And then most people would guess that. Maybe they'd guess Florida, and you give them, one phone a friend or Lifeline. But, it's, third is New Jersey. The 3rd largest solar energy producing state in the country is New Jersey. How did it happen? Because we partnered with the private sector to make solar energy affordable for people. If it's affordable, people are willing to do it. And you drive through New Jersey, you will see on the roofs of homes, on the roofs of manufacturing plants and other businesses, in front of large corporate office buildings, big solar arrays. And we're now producing the 3rd most solar energy in the country. That's wonderful, because we made it affordable for people. When it wasn't affordable, nobody did it. But in working with the private sector to make it affordable now, we're doing that in New Jersey. In Iowa, when I drive around Iowa, there are wind turbines everywhere. Well, Iowa's a big, flat state where wind turbines on the ground make sense. Let's let Iowa do wind energy. It makes sense for them. Let's let them do it. Let's empower them to do it. I don't think it would work in New Jersey. We start putting wind turbines on land, they're not going to just be dead birds, everybody. There could be dead people, because a little edgy there, So My point on renewables is that each state should be able to decide for itself which renewable makes sense for us, given our topography, our geography, which one makes sense for us. Because people will use renewable energies if they're affordable. If they're not affordable, they're going to say, heck with it, I'm not going to do that. That's the kind of energy approach I want to take to the country, is on renewables. Let's let each state make decisions about what makes sense for them, what's affordable for them, what's attractive to their citizens. And overall, in our country, let's continue to explore aggressively for oil and natural gas and invest in the technologies that make economic sense. Last part to think about energy is this. Right now, Vladimir Putin is running roughshod over us in Eastern Europe and now in Syria. And part of the way to hem him in, I think, would be more aggressive economic sanctions against Russia by ourselves and our friends in Western Europe. Here's the problem. In Western Europe, they get a great deal of their energy from Russia. And it puts them in a real bind. Love to help you out, don't like what he's doing in Crimea or Ukraine, but I have to tell you, we don't want cold homes in the winter. America can become an oil and gas exporter. And if we team with Canada and Mexico and make North America the energy continent of the world, we can then supply that energy to those folks jointly with our friends in Canada and Mexico and not ask for anything in return except just to be paid a fair market price. But what it will do is get them off of the dependence with Russia. Then we can say to them, we're going to give you this energy. You can buy it from us. We're not asking anything in return except for, how about some more sanctions on Putin? And then they don't have to worry about it. And that will make the world a much more interesting place for us and a much better place for everyone else if Mr. Putin could be put back in his cage, which is what we need to do. So I think the energy helps us in a bunch of ways. It can help us to be independent here and have lower energy costs here and a more robust economy. The last part of it, too, is we can attract manufacturing jobs back here if we make our electricity lower cost. Because manufacturing jobs, there's two major drivers of cost: labor and energy. Now, we can't compete with China or Mexico on labor costs, and we don't want to. We don't want to have folks not being able to make a middle-class wage working in manufacturing. But we can compete with them on energy, and we should, especially China. And a lot of those manufacturing jobs will leave China and come back to the United States if we get our energy costs down. And that's something that would be a real welcome change in this country, especially for the middle class that hasn't gotten a wage increase, a real wage increase in 15 years. So it's a good question. It has a lot of different layers to it. Yes, sir, in the back.
How would you cut waste and incompetence in government, particularly in the Veterans Administration, but throughout all agencies?
Well, the first way to cut waste and incompetence is when I become president, to tell my cabinet officials to find every bureaucrat that was hired by Barack Obama and fire them. On the VA in particular, let me tell you what my plan is for the VA and for veterans. First is that we made a promise to veterans in this country that if you put your life on the line, if you wore your country's uniform, that we would take care of your health care for the rest of your life. And we've broken that promise to many, many veterans. So in the short term, what we need to do is to say to every veteran, go with your veterans card to any doctor, any hospital, any healthcare provider in this country, not pre-approved, not anything else, anyone, and the federal government will pay for your health care. Because that's the promise that we made. That's what we need to do. But we also need to fix the VA, because there's a lot of expertise in the VA that we don't want to throw away. And there's a lot of really compassionate people who care about veterans in the VA, who I don't want to punish because they didn't have anything to do with the incompetence. So what I would do is, with all due respect to the admirals and the generals who we've put in charge of the VA traditionally over time, the VA is no longer something to be run by the military. It's to be run, it's a hospital system. That's what it is. And so what I want is to be able to go to the best hospital CEO in the country and say to him or her, listen, your country needs you for the next 2 years. Leave your private sector job, come and run the Veterans Administration and straighten out this hospital system. Bring the private sector efficiencies and effectiveness and transparency that exists in our private sector health system and bring it to the VA. I think that's the best way to fix it, because I don't want to throw it away. We have too much invested in it to throw it away. But we cannot any longer allow it to lie and cheat our veterans, because they're losing their lives in the process. and that's a sin. We can't have that. And so that's the way I would deal with it. And more broadly across all of government, I would say to each one of my cabinet secretaries, you need to go initially in your first year and find 1 penny of waste for every dollar that we send you. Doesn't seem hard, right? But let me tell you, in a $3 trillion budget, if they find 1 penny of waste for every dollar we send, we're going to get rid of a lot of waste. And what I'd say to them is, if you can't find that penny in the first year, then go get a new job, because you should be able to find that. And if you're not competent enough to find that, well, then heck, I'll find someone who is. So that's how I do it more broadly across the government. Right. Let's go to you right here, sir.
You just said that we should fire all of the bureaucrats. Is it really do you want to expand and revise your, are you really saying we're going to do away with the Civil Service Act?
No. What I'm saying is,
if we're firing federal bureaucrats, then
no. What I
that's the
said
GS
was
system.
hired by the Obama administration.
Bureaucrats?
Those are yeah, well, listen, I consider political appointees once they're in the government to be bureaucrats also.
All right.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not
Which
talking
is
about the
different from
civil
what you
service
said.
folks.
Good.
No, it's not. It's
I
not
don't
different than
want
what I
the
said.
cameras back there to say that you
No, this
just did away with
No. This is the
Civil
if
Service
I wanted
Act.
to get listen, I wouldn't. By the way, I wouldn't mind getting rid of civil service, because being a governor who operates in a situation where we have both in the government now, people are allowed to be civil service and be unionized at the same time. How does that make any sense? We have public sector unions who also have civil service. I mean, that's belt and suspenders. What happens when you're trying to manage a government, like I'm trying to manage in New Jersey, is you have to deal with 2 different grievance processes. So you have an incompetent employee, he grieves you under the civil service process. If you win there, he then grieves you under the union process. You know why no one gets fired in government? Because of that. Because if you're sitting at the top of it, you go, how much am I spending on lawyers? How much have I spent? I'm spending 3 times what I pay this joker in order to get rid of him. And a lot of people just throw up their hands and say, to hell with it. Just let him stay. So since we brought up civil service, which was not what I was talking about, but since you brought it up, I wouldn't have a big problem getting rid of civil service or unions, one or the other. But I don't know why we have to have both in the public sector. Civil service has been around forever, so let's stop unionizing public sector workers. Because I don't understand why they need a union when they're protected by civil service and the grievance process that exists in civil service and the step process on salaries that exist in civil service. Yet, we've allowed them to unionize too. And it's an extraordinary waste of time and money, and those unions have become the most powerful political force in the Democratic Party. The most powerful, the teachers union and all the other public sector unions. I'm not talking about the carpenters and the plumbers and the pipe fitters in the private sector. I'm talking about we've allowed government workers to unionize while they're also protected by civil service. And I think that's ridiculous. And we should get rid of one or the other. I don't care which one you get rid of. Whether you get rid of unionizing them or you get rid of civil service, but you should get rid of one of them because it's incredibly wasteful and it places an enormous restriction on the executive to be able to actually run the government in a way that this gentleman implies he wants me to run it, which is get rid of some waste. Well, it's hard to get rid of waste when you got to go through 3 years of grievance processes to fire one person in a government of millions and millions of people. But to be clear about what I meant in my answer to his question was those folks hired by the president, meaning those people who he had political discretion over to hire, which are throughout government, not just the cabinet secretaries and the sub-cabinet. You've got political appointees. Go to something online. If you're really bored one night and you're having trouble sleeping, go to something called the Plum Book. The Plum Book in the federal government. That is all of the jobs that the president has discretion to give outside of civil service. You will get 5 nights sleep by the time you get through the entire Plum Book. Those are the people I'm talking about. If you want to see specifically who I'm talking about, those are the folks I'm talking about. Yes, sir.
Hi, Governor. We've got a big lake out here, Winnipesaukee. I don't know if you saw it driving around the
I've been on it.
Okay.
I was on it on Mitt Romney's boat.
Yeah.
That's quite an adventure.
I don't know about Mitt's boat, but
I'll tell you about it if you want.
I'm an ex-Air Force guy. I should have maybe been in the Navy with the lake out there because when I'm out there, I don't know about Mitt, but a lot of rocks. I'll hit rocks. I'll put a hole in the boat. And the first thing I worry about is patching that hole and stopping the water from coming in, okay? So with that, I take care of the water afterward. So what I'm wondering is if you patched up the holes on the border, what's your plan to handle the water already in the boat? And I don't know if this
Quite
is
the analogy. I want to applaud you. That was really good.
I don't know. You probably have this on your website, but and you may have said this on stage, but you don't get much time up there. So
You're not
what
kidding. I'm happy to answer it again. But that is seriously the most artful way I've been asked about immigration. And I get asked about immigration almost every time. I'm happy to answer it again. Listen, let me tell you what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is deport 11 million people in 2 years. Okay, that's been suggested. All right, let me make you understand what that looks like. Okay, that's 15,000 people a day, every day, for 2 years. 15,000 people a day, every day, for 2 years. First off, who's going to do that? I've been in law enforcement for 7 years before I was governor. There are not enough law enforcement officers at the local, county, state, and federal level if all they did was to do that, first off. So if you're advocating that, you must be advocating an enormous expansion of law enforcement in this country, and I want to know how you're going to pay for it. Second, I want you to think about how that's going to look, because we're going to see it, you know. And I want to know what you think when we're going to be knocking down doors. And police officers, federal agents are going to be dragging people out of those homes in handcuffs and putting them on what exactly? A bus? A van? And then taking them where exactly? They're not all from Mexico, okay? 40% of the 11 million came here on a visa, came here at our invitation, and they overstayed their visa. They're from all over the world. How are we going to do this? So let's be commonsensical about it. The way I would deal with the water on the boat is two things. First, E-Verify. Most of the folks who come here illegally come here to work. Not like Hillary Clinton thinks to vote, but they come here to work, okay? If every business in this country is required to use E-Verify, which means to require that they, before they hire someone, verify that person's legal status to work in this country, a lot of those folks will leave if they can't get a job. And the penalty, for businesses should be, if you hire someone after the law is passed that's here illegally, your fine is double whatever it is you made off of that person. See, business is in the business of making money. And if you're going to bill them twice what they made, they're going to stop that conduct pretty quickly. We've got to acknowledge the fact that a porous border is not the only thing that contributes to this. It is businesses who are hiring these folks because they want to hire cheaper workers and not pay Americans more money. All right, so that's one of the ways. Second way is on the visa system. Now, I talked about this back in the summer here in New Hampshire and got a lot of attention. I said, if FedEx can track a package from the minute it leaves your door to the minute it gets to the door where you're sending it to, and you can go on the computer and see exactly, it's on the truck, it's on the plane, it's in the airport, it's, right? Like, who needs to know that really? But you can do that now. You can find that out. Why is it that people come into this country and we can't make sure they only stay as long as they are supposed to stay? What I would do is every person who comes in here on a visa, student visa, tourist visa, other work visa, that has a finite time to it, you get a thumbprint from that person. And you put it on a database. And then you require businesses, when you access certain services, renting cars, other things, to give the thumbprint. If it pops up that you've overstayed your time, we tap you on the shoulder and say, thank you for coming, appreciate it, time to go home. It's like, you invite somebody, a couple weeks to come to your house for Thanksgiving. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, you go upstairs to the guest bedroom and they're still there. Like, you invited them, but just for Thanksgiving, not for the whole holiday season. And, when I said this, the press said, oh, Christie wants to track immigrants like packages. No. First of all, these people are not immigrants. They are temporary visitors. Hence the name visa. They're a temporary visitor to our country. I had someone say, do you want to put barcodes on everybody when they come in? These are legitimate questions that I've gotten from the media. Another one said to me on CNN, she looked at me and said, do you want to put chips in people's bodies when they come? Let me be clear about this. We don't need to put a chip or a barcode. You got them right there. There's your barcode. Right there. Everybody's fingerprints are unique to that person. That's all we need to do. If we do those two things, that's how we deal with the water. And it's realistic, and it's affordable, and it's the right thing to do. That, in addition to doing the things we need to do at the border, which I've talked about many times, will help to deal with this problem. But be wary of someone who says they're going to deport 11 million people in 2 years, okay? I mean, I've been in this business. It's not going to happen. And be careful of candidates who tell you what they think you want to hear. It feels really good. It feels really good. But it's kind of like Chinese food. Right? You know what I mean about that, right? Yeah. You have Chinese food, right? You have Chinese food, and then like 2 hours later, you're hungry again. You're like, what happened? I ate the Chinese food. What happened? Listen, what you need to do is to have a candidate who is going to actually tell you what they're going to do and that it's going to be realistic and can be done. And the only way to know that is from experience. I wouldn't know that it was impossible to do that if it wasn't for the fact that I spent 7 years in law enforcement. Experience matters. And I understand that there's lots of people right now, it's fashionable to be saying, well, yeah, you know, the government stinks, fine. Washington does stink. So we want to send somebody down there who, you know, doesn't have any experience at all so he can just blow the thing up. Well, the guy with no experience can blow it up, I guarantee you that. But then who's going to rebuild it after he blows it up? So I think the folks in New Hampshire are a lot smarter than that. That's why the rest of America is counting on you to make the smart choice, the right choice. And this issue is one where it really is stark in terms of the differences between people who can, you know how to do these things and people who are just talking about ideas. And there's a difference. That's the way I would deal with the water in your boat. Don't hit the rocks anymore. I'll tell you one quick story about Romney's boat, since we got on Romney's boat. So I stayed at Mitt and Ann Romney's, Mary Pat and I did, and a couple of our children for 4th of July weekend. And they're wonderful friends of ours, as you all probably remember. I came up here in the fall of 2011 as the first governor in the country to endorse Governor Romney for president. And so we've been friends for a long time. And he invited us for 4th of July. So we came up, and he took us out on the boat. Now, you know, Mitt Romney has this reputation, right, of being this conservative, staid, kind of buttoned-up kind of guy. Go on his boat with him. You'll get an entirely different impression of Mitt Romney. We pulled out of the dock near their home, and we went out onto the lake. And let me tell you, man, this guy guns that boat. I mean, guns it. We take off so fast that I'm in one seat, and sitting right next to me is Ann Romney. He hit it so hard that she flew off her seat and landed on my lap. I'll leave it at that. It was a good trip around Lake Winnipesaukee, is all I can say. And we had fun with the Romneys, but so this image of Mitt Romney is the guy who's always very buttoned up. Get Mitt Romney on his boat. He's a lot of fun. And he enjoys taking that boat around the lake, and it's a beautiful lake to ride around, and it really made for a fun 4th of July weekend for me and Mary Pat and for our 2 older children who were with us. So they're good friends, and it's great to have them as friends. Yes, ma'am.
Terrorism, it's big, it's across the world, but it's also in small town USA. And if you could elaborate on your plans for terrorism in the United States as well as in the world.
Sure. I would tell you that this issue hits particularly home for me. I was named U.S. Attorney by President George W. Bush on September 10th, 2001. In New Jersey. And I took the next day off from work. My wife, on the other hand, went to her job like she normally did. Left at 6 o'clock in the morning, drove to the train station, took the train to the PATH station, and took the PATH into the World Trade Center. And then walked the 2 blocks from the World Trade Center to her office. And I took the kids to school that day, and then I went out for a walk, thinking about, wow, I've got a new career here, a new opportunity. It was a beautiful day, as you all remember. And I came back, turned on the TV, and the first building was on fire. And I called her immediately. I said, what the heck's going on? And she said, I don't know, I could see it out my window. She said, it's a big fire. She said, but they're saying it was a commuter plane that got like off course or something. It's nothing to be worried about. And so we're all just sitting here working. I said, all right. I said, wow, it looks bad. And she said to me, well, no, they say it's okay. And while we were on the phone, the second plane hit the second building. And she said, they're telling us we have to evacuate the building to the basement. I'll call you later. She hung up, and it was 5.5 hours that I didn't hear from her. And in the meantime, both buildings collapsed. There was all kinds of talk, as you remember on TV, about pipe bombs and other things in other places in Manhattan, all of which turned out to be false, but we didn't know it at the time. At the time, our children were 8 and 5 and 1. And the 8 and the 5-year-old were at school, and school called us and said, because there were so many in our area of North Jersey who had parents who go to work in Lower Manhattan, that they told all the children at school about what had happened. So I knew that my kids were coming home and first question was going to be, where's mom? And I was dealing in my own mind with two things. One, what was I going to tell them? And two, if the worst had really happened, I was confronting the idea of being a single parent to 3 young children and losing my best friend. Fortunately, at about 2:30 that afternoon, about 15 minutes before the kids got there, she called. And she had walked with a wet T-shirt wrapped around her face with about 15 of her colleagues uptown to a bar where they finally found an operating payphone. And she was able to call me. And she got on a boat on the east side of Manhattan to take her to the Jersey Shore. And when I went down to pick her up, they wouldn't let you get too close to the dock. And I saw what I thought was my wife walking down the street, wrapped in a blanket and soaking wet. I said, what happened to you? And she said, well, when we got off the boat, if you were from Lower Manhattan, the fire department was there, and they didn't want you to bring any of the contaminants into New Jersey, so they hosed you down with a fire hose and wrapped you in a blanket. 9/11 is not something in the history books for me. I lived it. And so it affects everyone, right? And we've now had 14 years without an attack of that scale on American soil. I will tell you that's not by accident. And what I'm worried about in this country now is that we're beginning to get some amnesia. That we're beginning to forget what it felt like. I mean, I went to those funerals. We had one of our good friends in our parish who was killed that day. My wife helped him get his job in the World Trade Center. My oldest son's best friend's dad was killed that day. Right? You were at the Pentagon. So you understand. And any of us who went through this in that personal a way, it never leaves you. It never leaves you. And so, just leave it at that. So, as president, I'm going to be, and I am, the only person on that stage that's prosecuted terrorists. I did the Fort Dix 6 case that you all might remember, of the 6 Islamic jihadists who were plotting to attack Fort Dix and kill American servicemen and women. We intervened in that case before they were able to do that, arrested them, and they're in jail for life. We did the shoulder fire missile case with the Indian-born British citizen who was selling shoulder fire missiles to a Yemeni terrorist group to shoot commercial airliners out of the sky at Newark Airport. I understand that what we need to do in this country is enhance our intelligence capability, not diminish it, like Senator Paul led the fight to do in the Congress. We need to trust our intelligence officers. They're doing an ugly, difficult job around the world. And for those who color outside the lines, they need to be prosecuted. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we need to understand that the threat is real, and it is still here today. And like you said, it can happen anywhere in this country. It's not just going to happen in New York City or Washington, D.C. It can happen anywhere. And that's why our intelligence capability has to be enhanced, and you have to have a president who understands that you can do that without violating people's civil liberties, and you can. But I also want to remind you, you can't practice your civil liberties from a coffin. And the fact is that the first and most important job of the President of the United States is to protect the lives and the security of the American people. If you fail at that job, nothing else you do matters. Nothing else you do matters. And so to me, it's twofold. It's enhancing our intelligence capability and giving them the tools they need and the guidance and support they need to be able to intervene beforehand. Because President Bush called all of us to the White House in, I think it was January or February of 2002, all the U.S. attorneys. And he had a very short, simple message for us. Never again. It's not good enough for you guys to catch these people after they act and send them to jail. You need to catch them before they act. I don't want another American life lost in this battle. And we all took that to heart. And I think, as I said at the first debate, I think we owe President George W. Bush an enormous debt for the way he kept this country safe and protected us during a time when none of us would have believed that we could have gone through the rest of his first term, let alone his second term, without there being another attack on American soil. But he did it. He protected our country. And for all the criticism that he gets about certain things, I will always stand up and A, be proud of the fact that I was a member of that administration, and B, that we did the job he gave us to do, which was to protect the American people. Second thing we need to do is to rebuild our military. I mean, the fact is that a lot of this stuff, this president has the smallest active duty army since 1940. He has the smallest Navy since World War I. And he is looking for a 50% reduction in the Air Force. Now, you know, can procurement and other things be better at the Pentagon? I'm sure they can. And I think if you get good leadership there, you can help to work on that with the professionals who work at the Pentagon. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the effects of sequester and the way the president imposed sequester, which was not to give discretion to any of his cabinet secretaries to pick and choose what to cut, but just to do it across the board. He did that on purpose, as you know, to impose pain, to try to get rid of spending restraints. But what he's done in the process is to make us less safe and to make our military less effective and to strain the men and women who work for the Department of Defense. And so I would increase the active duty Army to 500,000 soldiers. I would never let the Marines get under 185,000 active duty Marines. I would get us back up to 350 ships in the Navy. I would modernize the Ohio class of submarines. And I would say we never should have less than 2,600 coded aircraft ready to go. Because other people are seeing our diminishment of our military. And that's why they're being aggressive with us. Not only other nations, but terrorist groups as well. And so those two things are things we need to do to protect the security and the safety of the American people. I would do those things. And the last thing I would tell you is this. Having a former federal prosecutor sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office in times like this will be a real advantage. Because the intelligence community or the law enforcement community is not going to be able to throw a high, hard one by me. I've been there. I've been on the front lines of this fight. I know how to make these decisions. I've made these decisions. And I'm not going to have to rely upon someone else's judgment about whether something sounds right or doesn't in this area. I've lived it. And I've lived it in one of the most dangerous places in the world to live it. In the most ethnically diverse state in America, where a number of those hijackers on 9/11 lived and launched the attack from Newark Airport. So I've lived this thing, and it's deadly serious to me. And that's why I've fought so hard and had the arguments I've had with Senator Paul on the stage, not only about drugs, but also about this issue of intelligence. You know, he says, I want more intelligence from terrorists and less intelligence from innocent people. I'm like, well, hell, that sounds really good, except how do you know? Terrorists don't wear sandwich boards saying, I'm a terrorist, I'm plotting against your nation. The way you know is from intelligence. That's the way you know. And, you know, he says, get a warrant. Well, listen, man, you have to have evidence to go and get a warrant. And so, you know, again, it goes back to your question. Beware of people who have opinions in this race about things they've never done. It's easy to have an opinion about something you've never done. I got lots of opinions about physics. Don't listen to one of them. I was a C student in physics. I never really understood it. I understood it enough just to get by and finish my science requirement. If I give you an opinion on physics, run the other way. It's not worth it. But if I give you an opinion about terrorism and law enforcement, if I give you an opinion about the intelligence community and the use of that intelligence within our civil liberties to be able to apprehend terrorists before they act, listen to that because I've done it. And I know how to do it, and the people who don't know how to do it should stand down. Did you want to follow up?
I would follow. I think that it's useful that the president listens to the leaders of the armed forces and chief of staff, and also listens to the intelligence report. It seems like our president today does not.
Well, he's. I was about to say something uncharitable. I would just say to you that I agree. I agree. And you bring the best, as a leader, one of your jobs is to bring the best people you can find around you and then to listen to their advice. 50% or more of leadership is listening, not talking, especially when you're president. Now, they're telling me I can take one more question, which means I will take two. The reason for that is I want to remind them at all times that I am the boss. All right? So, ma'am, I'll give you mine. Here you go.
Thank you, Governor. Just a brief question, although I have like 5 others in my head. What is your opinion about closing Guantanamo?
Totally opposed to it. And let me tell you, why the President of the United States hasn't closed it. Because he knows who's there. Now, he could close Guantanamo with the stroke of a pen. We've seen him do outrageous things with executive orders, illegal things with executive orders. He could close Guantanamo with the stroke of the pen. He's been talking about this since 2007, when he started running for president. 2007. Why the hell hasn't he closed it already? Because he don't want these people here either. He doesn't want to send them back from where they're from, and he doesn't want to bring them here. That's why he hasn't closed it. Guantanamo Bay serves a useful purpose, but part of the problem we have now is this president's normalized relations with Cuba for nothing in return. And what's the first thing Castro asks for? 2 things. Guantanamo and reparations. Reparations from the United States for the trade embargo. I mean, I got to tell you the truth. I wouldn't let Barack Obama buy me a car. I mean, this is the worst negotiator in the world. If he went to the local car dealer here with you, you know what he'd do? He'd walk you in and he'd say to the salesman, listen, my friend here is not leaving this showroom today without a car. What can you do for us on price? Well, you'd leave with an empty pocket, paying sticker, all right? So we should not close Guantanamo under any circumstances. We should not abandon Guantanamo to the Cuban government. And we should keep those folks exactly where they are. They are prisoners of war. And that war is ongoing. And we are not going to release them back to the battlefield. Never been done in the history of warfare, should not be done now. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am, you get the last one.
Thank you. And the last shall be first.
Yes.
You talk about increasing our military. How do you, without a draft, how do you plan on increasing our manpower?
Listen, I think what's happening now is the president is not permitting the recruitment. He's not permitting the retention of these folks. Some folks are leaving voluntarily, but others are not. And because the president is on a designed downgrade of the number of our active duty soldiers, Marines, and sailors, and members of the Air Force, the airmen. I think that we could do it with a volunteer army. I really do, and a volunteer military. And I don't think we need to resort to a draft at this point to do it. We've been at these levels before in recent times under President Bush. We can get back to those levels. We have to fund it, and we have to recruit them. You know, and there are lots of very patriotic young men and women in this country who would want to serve their country if they felt that their service was valued. And we have a commander-in-chief right now who they don't believe values their service. And there's a lot of morale problems in the military because, and I've spoken to parents of military members who say that their sons and daughters believe that the president doesn't value what they do. Now that may be true or not. I can't look into the president's heart. I'm not saying I know that. I'm telling you what they feel. And that affects your ability to retain folks in the military as well. If you don't feel as if your commander-in-chief values what you do, well then, you know, you probably going to look to go work for someone who does value what you do. And these young men and women are talented people, and they have choices in their careers, not just to stay in the military, but to do other things. So that's the way I would do it. Give them a commander-in-chief valued their hard work and their patriotism, and go out there and heavily recruit them. Recruit the best and the brightest to come to the military. And let them know, by fixing the VA, that when they leave the military, they're going to be taken care of like they were promised to. All of that is part of the mosaic that gives them the impression about whether they want to serve or not serve. It's really important. And we need to continue to do that, and I'm going to do that as president. So let me say two things to you before I go. The first is to say thank you again, as I did at the beginning. For you to come on a Saturday morning and take your time to listen to me is a real act of an active democratic society. And when people get cynical, and they do, about government, and we deserve to at times because of what government's done and not done for us, I tell people, come to New Hampshire, because you get reinvigorated in the fact that our democracy can really work. That everyday folks who love their country, believe in their families, take the time to come out and listen to folks like me as you're trying to make your decision about who to vote for. I will tell you that I got, in a town hall meeting, this is my fourth or fifth one that I did here in New Hampshire. I had a gentleman come up to me afterwards, and he said, "You made a mistake." And I said, "Okay, what was my mistake?" He said, "You forgot to do something, and since you forgot to do it, I can't vote for you." I said, "Okay, well, what did I forget to do?" He said, "See? Yeah." And he said, looked at me, he said, "Son, in New Hampshire, that's what you do." So I'm never going to leave one of these town hall meetings again, sir. I don't know whether I'm Martin or Lewis in this combination today. I really don't. We can flip a coin later. I'm never going to leave without saying I want your vote. But not only do I want your vote, I want your trust and your confidence. See, if all I get is your vote, I'll become president. But I cannot be a successful president if I don't have your trust and your confidence. And I have no interest in going and doing this job and not being successful. I want to go there to do the job. And I want you to know that I want the job. I'm not one of these guys who's wandering around here saying, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would be more fun. I thought it would be better. I thought you'd like me more. I thought you wouldn't like them. This is hard." What did you think? It's President of the United States. You think it wasn't going to be hard? Did you think somehow some people were just going to put you on their shoulders and carry you out of this place and go, "You're it, we love you"? And that's not what this is about. It is hard. I want you to know I embrace it. I want it to be hard because it prepares me. It prepares me for what it's going to be like when I walk into that office for the first time and I realize that I'm the leader of 330 million Americans who want a better country for their children and their grandchildren and want me to help to make it happen. I want it to be hard. I embrace it. I want to be your president. But I want to be your president in a way that helps me to be successful at it. And that's by having your trust and your confidence in addition to your vote. So amending the advice that some give me here in New Hampshire to not only ask for your vote, but to ask for your trust and your confidence too, because that will help to make me a successful president. Last thing you need to know is that you're not just voting for a set of proposals, a set of ideas. You go to the website, look at them. We have more detailed proposals than any candidate in this race because I believe it's important for you to know what kind of president I would be, what my priorities would be, what I would pursue. I don't want you to buy a pig in the poke like we did 7 years ago. Right? I don't want hope and change again. I want results. I want results. So you need to know that, but that's not all you need to know. Because no matter how many questions you ask me, no matter how many town halls I do, you're never going to ask me every question. No one asked George W. Bush in 2000, what would you do if 4 airplanes were hijacked, 2 of them were flown into the World Trade Center, 1 was flown into the Pentagon, and 1 was crashed by the citizens on that plane into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania? What would you do, Governor Bush, if that happened on your watch? No one could have ever anticipated that. But what we knew, because we felt like we had gotten to know George W. Bush, was we knew that he had the strength of character to deal with that moment. He had the strength of character to deal with that moment. We could see it in his eyes that day. We could see it in the emotion that he showed. We could see that he had it. So what I suggest to you is you need to know more than the proposals. You need to get to know who we are. That's why this process in New Hampshire is so important. It's not just seeing a 30-second ad or a website. You got to get to know us. So here's who I am. I am the product of my mother and my father. We all are, for good and for bad. We're the product of our parents, right? I have an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. Okay, see? Here's what that tells you for those people who went, oh, yeah. As the firstborn son in that family, I became expert at dispute resolution at an early age. This house was loud, it was emotional, it was out there, okay? And my dad, who I know is watching this morning, because we live stream these things on our website, and my dad watches all of them. He's now got some technology. What's it called, Maria? What's the technology called that my father uses to put on the TV? Yeah, Google Chrome. My father now watches this stuff from the computer. My 82-year-old father is Google Chrome. Like, he doesn't even know what that really means, I suspect, but he knows that it works, and he watches it on his television, so I know he's watching this morning. He's a great guy. You know, he's this gregarious Irishman. If he were here, he would be hugging you after this was over. He'd be telling you embarrassing stories about me from when I was growing up and having a great time. You'd love him. If he came here, you would absolutely love him. He's a wonderful guy. But I've told him over and over again that in the automobile of life, he was merely a passenger. Mom was the driver, okay? Mom was judge, jury, and executioner, and she liked that last job the best. She set all the rules in the house. She was the rule setter. And Mom said the most important rule in our house was there is no suffering in silence. Now, I think she established that as the number one rule because she used it the most. Whenever she had a problem or any kind of concern, it was out there. You had to listen. You had to hear it. And when I got to be a teenager and I could push back a little bit, I'd say, Mom, all right, I get it. Stop. I hear it. Stop. She goes, no, Christopher. You're going to hear this now. I need to get it off my chest. There'll be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it now. That's the way she taught us to be. That's what she demanded of us. And so I said I had a Sicilian mother because, as I talked about in the beginning, my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2004 on Valentine's Day, 2004. And, you know, with that disease, sometimes it goes very quickly, sometimes it goes slowly. With my mom, unfortunately, it went really quickly. And so by the end of April of 2004, I was at the U.S. Attorney's National Conference in San Diego, California. And my younger brother called me and he said, listen, Mom's been put back in the hospital. It's really bad. And the doctors told me that if you don't get home now, you probably won't see her again. So I said, all right. So I got on the red-eye flight that night. I flew home to New Jersey, got home the next morning, got in the car, went right to the hospital. And they had started to give her morphine. For any of you who've gone through this with a loved one who's lost them to cancer, you know that that's kind of the last steps. They're making her comfortable. And so I got there, so she was sleeping. So I sat next to the bed for a while, and she finally woke up. And it was typical of my mother. She had not seen me for a week. She opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and she said, what day is it? And I said, good morning, Mom. How are you? Good to be back. Hope you're doing well. My flight was fine, and it's good to see you. She goes, what day is it? I said, it's Friday. She said, what time is it? I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. She said, go to work. I said to her, Mom, I flew all the way from California overnight to come and see you. I'm taking the day off. I'm spending it with you. I'm not going to work today. She said to me, she said, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. I said, like, what are you afraid of not getting your taxpayers' money's worth? Like, I'll make up the time, all right? I will make up the time. Don't worry about it. I am staying here with you today. This is what I'm doing, so stop. And she leaned over and she grabbed my hand and she said, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us. Other than the birth of our 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment of my life. My mother, who I love, was giving me permission to let her go. And it was based on exactly what she had taught us our whole life. There was nothing left unsaid. Every joy had been shared. Every grievance had been aired. Everything had been out there. There was nothing left for me to say to her. She knew I loved her, and I knew she loved me. And the rest of it didn't matter. And so I did as I was told. I stood up, I kissed her on the forehead, and I said, okay, I'll go to work. And she looked at me, she said, good boy. And I left. And 3 hours later, she went into a coma. And 3 days later, she died. It was the last conversation we ever had. And I will tell you, I don't have one regret. And the reason I don't have one regret is because of her, right? There was nothing. She was right all those years when I used to shut her up, when she said, there'll be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're hearing it now? She was right. There weren't. There didn't need to be. And so, you know, now that Donald's in the race, I'm the second most psychoanalyzed candidate in the race. I used to be the first, but now I'm the second. When I say things like, get the hell off the beach and sit down and shut up, and people say, why is he saying that? Is he angry? What's wrong with him? What's his temperament? Now you know, it's her. It's her. She taught me to be that way. That's the way we were raised. That's the way I was taught. And I know that if she were alive now to see this circus that my life has become, she'd have lots to say. But I know there's two things she'd have to say for sure. The first thing she'd say, so, you're running for president of the United States, Mr. Big Shot. Remember something, buddy. I changed your diaper. I know who you are. That would be my mother's way of saying to me, like, keep your feet on the ground and keep your head on your shoulders and don't get too big for yourself. And then the second thing I know she'd say to me is, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to ask these people to trust you more than they trust anyone else other than their own family by giving you the most important job they can give you, then you better tell them everything. You better tell them exactly what you think and exactly how you feel. You better hold nothing back, because Chris, in a trusting relationship, that's what we do. And this campaign and the way I am and the way I'm running it is because of her. 11 years after her death, she is still the single most influential person in my life. And I will tell you, I never thought I could be surprised by anything anymore up here in New Hampshire. But yesterday, when I went to file my papers to be on the ballot here on February 9th, I met with the press afterwards. And a member of the press asked me a question that I was completely unprepared for. He said to me, Governor, if your mother were alive, what would she feel today and what would she say to you? It's the first time in all this that I've gotten really emotional. It was really hard for me to answer that question. And basically, if you see it, you'll see I couldn't. I said, I don't know. I'm sure she'd be proud. I don't know what she'd say. I'm sure she'd have something to say, but I don't know what it would be. At that moment, sitting in the Secretary of State's office in New Hampshire, I felt her when he asked that question. And that's the thing you need to know about whoever you're going to vote for president. What's inside and where did it come from? Because only then will you know, when that huge crisis comes across the desk, is this someone I can trust to handle it? Is this someone I can trust with the lives of my children and my grandchildren? And so I don't know whether that makes it for you or not, but you have a right to know it. And that's why I'm telling you about it. In the end, what you need to know more than anything else is that for a guy from New Jersey who's had the life that I've had, to have the opportunity I have to run for president of the United States, I feel incredibly blessed. And I'm blessed by your presence this morning and your interest in me and your willingness to consider me. And so I hope you do. I hope you vote for me. I hope I get to be president of the United States. And if I do, I promise you that every day I will work as hard as I can to make you proud of the vote that you cast. And if we get that done, we're going to be well on our way to unleashing the greatness of the people of this country, and allowing the world once again to know that America is back on the job and ready to set the example for the rest of the world. That's what I hope for, and I hope it's what you hope for too. So thanks for coming this morning. I appreciate it.
Very good.
Hit it out of the park again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime, guys.
Thank you.
Come back again.
You
You're doing good.
Thank you very much.
Governor, thank you for speaking from the heart.
You got it.
Jersey to Jersey.
You got it, buddy. Thank you.